computer. Starting Audacity. All right, clap sync Dylan.
Clap sync Niles.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Play Pause Rewind. This will be our 49th episode and our penultimate episode of 2022. Which I think we're coming up on the end of our second year of doing this show, I think. Yeah.
I think so. If I'm doing my math right in my head,
Yeah.
I think we're getting close for sure.
We're getting pretty close, but how have you been, Niles, since our last episode?
Been good. You know, the holidays are always a good time of the year. For our listeners, I like to think of myself as a flexitarian. Like I'm mainly a pescatarian for most of the year. And then, I'll cheat sometimes and have some turkey or some chicken. And Thanksgiving's definitely one of those holidays where it's like, okay, yeah, this is fine. There's a dead bird. I might as well eat some of it. It's always a good time. I'm very excited to talk about what we got on the docket today. But Dylan, how about you? How have you been?
Pretty good. I'm now getting confused. Did we do our last episode before Thanksgiving or after? Who knows?
I think it was before.
Maybe it was before. Thanksgiving was good. If we didn't talk about that last time, I genuinely cannot remember.
Time's a blur.
Yeah, it is a blur, but pretty good for the most part. We and a couple friends went to watch America play in the World Cup on Saturday morning.
Woo.
Got up so early, and boy, they let us all down, didn't they?
God, yeah, what a rough match that was.
It wasn't good. It was not good.
We'll get him in 4 years. We'll get back there, I'm sure.
Yeah, we say that every time, but it never happens. But that's okay.
Yeah.
Because we are talking about something much more fulfilling than that, and that's Andor. And as always, we are going to do a couple minutes of non-spoilers, and then we're going to do spoilers from then on out. So if you have not watched this show, you should go watch it. Ignore us. Come back later.
Yes,
because I think spoilers for the episode, but we're both pretty positive on this show, and it's not getting watched enough. So, what is Andor, you might ask? Well, it's the newest Star Wars show on Disney Plus, created by Tony Gilroy and starring Diego Luna, Genevieve O'Reilly. Wow, Stellan Skarsgård, Denise Go, Kyle Soller, and many, many more. It focuses on Cassian Andor's adventures 5 years before the events of the movie Rogue One, which you may remember from several years back. And it's kind of about the nature and necessity of revolution against fascism and imperialism. So what are your thoughts on Andor, Niles? Non-spoiler, of course.
Yeah, I think this is a very special episode of Play Pause Rewind because we love to talk about Star Wars. If you haven't already before, we've done a few Star Wars episodes in the past on Obi-Wan and
Mandalorian season 2.
Mandalorian, and then Visions as well.
Visions, that's right. Yeah.
We've done some Star Wars stuff. So you can tell that we're Star Wars fans. We really like it. Dylan and I think we said this before. We've grown up with it, and obviously we grew up with the prequels. And we both have very strong opinions, I would say, on some of those movies, and just Star Wars in general, and I think a lot of people do too. So I think when this series was first announced, they were like Andor, they were mapping out everything that was coming out for Star Wars, and they had like a billion things in the production pipeline, and I think this was probably the show that I was least excited about, honestly, because I was more focused on Obi-Wan and these other cool things like down the line, like Ahsoka, and I think Ocelite, I think is one as well.
Acolyte.
Thank you. Sorry.
It's just a word, man.
But it's Star Wars. It's So yeah, Andor, I don't think I was super excited about as it was kind of coming along. So I had no interest in it. And now I agree with you, Dylan. I want everyone to watch this because this is, I think, if not the best Star Wars series. It is, I think, by far the best live action series for Star Wars so far.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't had too many live action series for Star Wars. We've had The
Uh,
Mandalorian and Boba Fett, and
yeah, four, yeah.
yeah, we have, and Obi-Wan. We've had
Mm-hmm.
some others. But what I like about this kind of new era of Star Wars too, and I think a lot of people agree, is that it's exploring these areas of Star Wars that have been very underdeveloped and not focused on at all. And that's what Andor does as well.
Mm-hmm.
It really does hone in on the underbelly of the rebellion, these rebels kind of building it up very slowly and gradually.
Right.
And I think this is just fantastic all the way around. And, I think part of that is due to the fact that um, I don't remember everything from Rogue One very well.
Mm-hmm.
And so from my recollection, I don't think it was a very good movie. I think it had a lot of fan service in there. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
there were some good aspects to it, but, I don't think that they spent enough time really developing all those characters and fleshing them out and making them feel like real people sometimes. And I think
Yeah.
Andor, even though he was in that movie, I don't think it really did much to develop his character. So I'm glad it's kind of coming back to this character that we don't know a lot about. Like, you compare
Mm-hmm.
this to something like Obi-Wan. We know everything there is to know about Obi-Wan. And there's a lot of kind of like limited there's a lot of limitations with the narrative structure of Obi-Wan.
Yeah, yeah. Because
And this
it's
one, yeah.
yeah. I think you're right. I want to respond to a couple things you just said, because
Yes.
one, I think the biggest problem plaguing the most modern iteration of Star Wars, and I'm talking post Last Jedi. This wasn't a
Sure.
problem up until the Last Jedi, but I think the problem Star Wars has had is that it's not delving into these unearthed corners of Star Wars enough. Like, Mandalorian started kind of doing that, and then in season
Mhm.
2, it's just like a fucking who's who of cameos for the whole season. And we did an episode on it. We both liked that season, but Mandalorian is the strongest when it is the Mandalorian.
Yes.
And a lot of season 2 was not that. And Book of Boba Fett, it's just like bringing back this character from the original trilogy to give him another story that he doesn't really need. Obi-Wan Kenobi, even more so. It's like there is nothing that you can really do with Obi-Wan and Vader and those characters in that time frame, because
Mhm.
you cannot wreck the status quo in any meaningful way. There was no purpose to them meeting, because their situations cannot change. And I will admit they do a couple interesting things with that in there, but Andor, in contrast, is it takes a character from Rogue One who was fine. And I agree with you. I don't think Rogue One is that great. And I wrote it in other stuff. It's something I watched because
Yeah.
but I'll mention it here now because it's more appropriate here, I think. Watching this and rewatching it with my family when they were here, it made me want to revisit Rogue One. I'm like, I want to see how this character story ends again. And you're right. Like the prequels, Rogue One has a lot of really interesting ideas that it does not fully make use of. And like the idea of, let's tell the story of the band of rebels who stole the Death Star plans. It's a good pitch. It's a really good pitch. And the idea that it's gonna be like a darker, grittier Star Wars, like more down to earth, regular people, great. It does all of that, but the pacing is so whack. It jumps. There are too many characters for one, and
Yeah.
it jumps between all of these places. We never get to know any of them super well. And I'm gonna make a video on this, but I want to go on a Rogue One tangent really, really quick.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Rogue One, and so there was always a joke in Star Wars. It's like, how is there such a glaring flaw in the Death Star? Like, oh my God, you can just shoot this one thing. And Rogue One falls into that trap and misunderstands the Death Star. And every fan who honestly believes that line misunderstands the Death Star, because the point of the exhaust port is that the Death Star doesn't have any weaknesses. They gave everything for those plans, and the best option they could find is an exhaust port on a moon-sized space station. It is meant to illustrate that they are up against impossible odds and that they really have no chance of winning, but they're going to fight anyway. And Rogue One fucks that up so much, because instead of it being an exhaust port that is just there because large machines expel exhaust, the tiny 1 in a million shot exhaust port was a deliberate structural flaw placed there by Mads Mikkelsen.
Right.
Um,
Yes. I
which
forgot about that.
if you're making that your like ace in the hole, if you're Galen Urso, his character's name, what the fuck are you doing? Like that's not
Yeah.
enough. That's not good enough. And it also and that's part of where I think Rogue One falls short. It's trying to fill a plot hole that was never a plot hole. It's not about the characters first. It's about filling a plot hole. And I've talked about this with you a lot. It's like trying to make a story centered around filling in plot mechanics is never going to be as satisfying as something that's character first. Also with Galen Urso, they said at the time that he was meant to be like a Robert Oppenheimer figure. The guy who made the nuclear bombs.
Yes.
And I think the way they wrote Galen Urso misunderstands Robert Oppenheimer too, because Oppenheimer didn't sabotage the nuclear bombs. He built them to work. And then when he realized how horrible they were later in his life, he became regretful. Galen Urso deliberately sabotaging the Empire, like it doesn't fit with Oppenheimer. It doesn't fit with the theme. Imagine the ending of Rogue One is the same, except Galen Urso, he didn't build a flaw into the Death Star, but he does change his mind and say, like, the plans of this station are on this planet. If you can get them to the rebels, you might be able to find a weakness. Same ending, just change that. Now, all of these hundreds to thousands of rebels are dying just for the tiny little chance that there might be something there. That's so much more powerful. Okay, rant over. I'm so sorry. But Andor does everything Rogue One was trying to do, but better. Rogue One walked so Andor could run. I think. And it may be some of the best Star Wars that has ever existed, I think.
Yeah. And no, I agree. And I appreciate the context around Rogue One there too. Cause I don't think I watched that movie like after the first time I watched it. I was like, that's kind of a one and done film for me. I don't know if I'll return to that, but I might go back and rewatch it now after finishing Andor, just kind of to do what you said.
Cassian's prison. The spoiler shit. A guy in this show is in that movie, but he's a background extra.
Yeah, he's got less agency for sure.
Yeah.
And, yeah, and I think another reason why Andor really works well is because it's not getting too hung up on the big things of Star Wars, or like the big draw, the big appeal of Star Wars. And I think for a lot of people, ever since it came out, the original, it was about the Force wielders, this big kind of entity that's always around us.
Right.
Or not entity, just Force, just general kind of vibes, I guess, through everything.
The energy field that connects all living things.
Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. But yeah, it's like an energy field, and it's these old knights from an old age with these laser swords, and it's like these blasters, and it's all really cool. But that's really what kind of drew people in initially, I think, to Star Wars, was this idea of this energy field, the Force, these the Jedi versus the Sith, these kind of big baddies, and with the exception of Solo and some of these other shows that are coming out, like the Bad Batch with Star Wars. Star Wars has really only ever focused on the Force and those Force wielders, lightsabers, and all that good stuff. And I like that stuff just as much as the next guy. It's fun, and it's just kind of like, it's just cool to look at. I really like Tales of the Jedi. Even that was just cool. Just to have that kind of like dynamic of just like Jedi swinging stuff around. But I'm glad that we got Andor, because it's not focusing on that anymore. There's not any lightsabers, there's no Force, there's nothing, there's no Jedi or Sith. This is all just focused on the little guys, the people that are the risk takers, and that are actually the victims of like all this oppression of the Empire, of fascism. And it's just, I think that's a big reason why this worked. It's exploring this territory of Star Wars, this underbelly that we were kind of talking about earlier, that they have just ever so slightly just like taken a little bit off the top on occasion and been like, this is enough. It's like, no, please dig a little deeper, give me a little bit more of that. And that's what this series really does.
Yeah. And when like most people weren't excited for this, right? Because it was just like, I think the response at the time was like, you're making a show about Cassian Andor. Why? But I
Right.
actually had a different take initially. I'm like, okay, you're making a show about a character I don't care that much about from a movie that I think is just okay. Okay, you've got something. Like you're making something special here. Otherwise, why is this what you've
Hmm.
chosen to do, right? And um no problem with the Mandalorian being what it is, right? Like it's a fun space adventure show. That's great. Book of Boba Fett, but Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan, I think, are both like, let's make an Obi-Wan show. Let's make a Boba Fett show. The fans want this. The fans love Boba Fett and Obi-Wan. But
Hmm.
Andor feels like it's about something. Like it has a creative spark that
Yeah.
those shows do not. Those shows were clearly like market research driven projects, in my opinion. This
Yes.
is like this show is very angry and hopeful at the
Hmm.
same time. It has a lot to say about imperialism, fascism, the police,
Yes.
corporations. It's a very and revolution and it's honest about revolution, which we'll talk more about in spoilers, because it's ugly.
Yeah.
um, but it and Star Wars has always been anti-fascist, right? Like pretty explicitly, the Empire
Hmm.
is very much visually inspired by the Nazis. Uh, George Lucas has explicitly stated that he based the rebels in large part on the Viet Cong fighting back against the American Empire.
Hmm.
Uh, so it's not like Star Wars has ever been apolitical or not done this, but I think Andor takes it to the next level.
Yeah,
So.
I think you're right. It definitely leans into that hard. And yeah, we'll talk more about it in spoilers. But
Mhm.
yes, it's very much anti-fascism, very much anti-imperialism. Um, and yeah, it'll be interesting to talk about in just a second, before we hop in. But one other thing that we'll talk about too before we dive in, I think, is like the visual look of this show.
Yes.
Compared to some of these other ones that have come out really recently, like Obi-Wan and The Mandalorian. Yeah, I think this one is it looks the best
Mhm.
visually, and it's
Yeah.
because they've been shooting on location. It's
And
like,
with real sets, like that entire Rick's Road,
mhm,
it's like a full central avenue of this town on a planet called Ferrix. That's one huge set. You can Google pictures
wow.
of it, just Rick's Road set, a massive set. Um and yeah, no shade to the volume. It's a great piece of technology. It works really well on in The Mandalorian, for the most part, I think. But Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan both look extremely cheap. And I think modern Lucasfilm was running into the same problem that George ran into on the prequels, is that they were overusing this new piece of technology where it wasn't appropriate. George did it with the
Hmm.
blue screens in the early 2000s, and they were doing the same thing on Obi-Wan and Boba Fett, and those shows look bad. Uh, they look terrible. So it's nice and it's not like Andor doesn't have CGI or special effects. There are
Yes.
lots of it, but the world feels very tangible and lived in because they actually built it.
Yes.
um,
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, all the cinematography is really excellent. Honestly, like even when they're on Aldani,
mhm.
just like the landscapes are beautiful, and that's just really cool that they were able to like go and actually film that in person. And I'm sure some
Mhm.
of that is CGI,
Yeah.
but it looks far and away better than some of those like locations, um, that are like from The Mandalorian season 2 that are,
Hmm.
you know, the background doesn't look amazing. It could be a little bit better, but
Right.
that's crazy. I didn't realize that set was so big.
Yeah,
Honestly.
it's massive, but it's and with Boba Fett and Obi-Wan, I can understand, like, I think a lot of their filming happened during COVID, so there's probably that limitation as well.
Hmm.
But lots of things were filmed during COVID. The Batman was filmed during COVID, a lot of it, I think. And that movie also uses the volume a lot, but you don't notice it because they use it intelligently. Like it's the same thing we always say, right? Like use every tool in the toolbox, but know when to use it. Like you're, you
Yeah,
know, you're not going to use a wrench to hang up a painting.
try me. I'll try it.
Yeah, I know. But like this movie like Rogue One walked so this could run, I think this also takes a lot of the political intrigue stuff that was kind of present a little bit in the prequels, but doesn't really work, and makes it work because there's a lot of political intrigue and there's Senate hearings and stuff like that in this show, but they work because the dialogue is sharper and it just there's more tension, and we'll get into that in spoilers. We can't talk about it now, but
Yeah.
before spoilers, any final thoughts on the show?
No, I don't think so. But let's just dive on in. Why not?
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, spoiler time. And if you didn't know, this show is broken up into a couple different arcs, and that Cassian goes on. So we are going to talk about those arcs individually just to organize ourselves a little bit. But the show also spends a lot of time with Senator Mon Mothma and the Imperial Security Bureau, the ISB, and those don't fit as cleanly into those arcs. So we'll start with them, then go through the arcs, and then talk about some thematic stuff towards the end. So
Yes.
let's start with Mon Mothma, Senator Mon Mothma. She, if you don't know who this character is or don't remember, she's in Return of the Jedi. She's like the leader of the rebellion at that point. She's in like the white cloak with the necklace. This actress played her in a deleted scene of Revenge of the Sith, where she, Padme, and a couple other senators were like planting seeds of like, oh, maybe the Republic isn't good anymore and we should do a rebellion, like, but it got cut. And then she was brought back for Rogue One in the few scenes she's in there. And now she's in this.
Yeah.
Another Rogue One thing. Sorry, real quick. There's a point in that movie where like Mon Mothma is talking to Jyn Erso when they first bring her in, and then the movie like stops for 15 seconds while Bail Organa walks out of the shadows and just stands there, and then the movie continues. And I'm like, that is the difference between Rogue One and this. Rogue One paused the story to say, remember Bail Organa, Leia's adoptive father, who you remember from the prequels. He didn't do anything in that scene, and then it carried on. And then there's the other part with him later on. It's like, I'm sending her to get my Jedi friend. It's like, this is not part of the story. That's the difference. That's the difference between these two, because Andor doesn't do that shit at all.
No, yeah. Andor puts Mon Mothma in a more tangible situation, and one that's like actually does something for the story, and it actually has a meaning. It's not just here's like 2 minutes of dialogue from her,
right,
or anything like that, or like kind of a shoehorned cameo. No, like she is getting plenty of screen time in this series, and it's just great. Honestly, I enjoyed all of her scenes because there is there's a lot of problems with Star Wars. I'll give you that. There's a lot of problems with it and a lot of logistical things that make you kind of pause and say, well, wait a second, how does that work? That doesn't entirely make sense. How does Darth Vader like go to the bathroom? These kinds of things that like if you stop for a second and you step back and you start to think about it, it really
as
gets
with any fantasy, right?
Like, exactly.
It's a good, yeah. We're talking about the goofy Space Wizard series. Remember, like that's what this is.
Yeah, it does not need to be like I don't need everything explained to me.
This is the thing George Lucas made because he couldn't get the rights to make Flash Gordon. We have to remember that.
Yes.
But Mon Mothma is almost the second protagonist of this show, and her storyline is very tense. On a high level, she is working with Stellan Skarsgård's character Luthen, who is a antiques dealer on Coruscant, and she is laundering him money basically to fund the birth of the rebellion. And she's in trouble because her accounts don't look proper by the Imperial banking inspectors anymore, so she is in trouble and has to navigate that.
And it's just like it was her story is interesting because it does address kind of that logistical gap in the chronology of like, how did the rebellion actually get funding? How did it start? Who was kind of this grassroots person? And I think we always kind of felt like it was Mon Mothma, because of that deleted scene and because, she was in the sixth film.
She's the leader, so by Star Wars logic, she was always the leader.
Yes, because she's always been there from the beginning. Yeah, it can never be anyone else. But I appreciate that we got these scenes from her because the bureaucracy of Star Wars never really makes sense. So it's really nice to get a glimpse into that logistical aspect of things. And I really enjoyed all of her scenes because it's just so tense and desperate. Because yeah, she doesn't she if she gets found out, then that's it. Like
Yeah.
her whole career's gone. She has no
Hmm.
idea what she's gonna do next. Like what does she do? Like at this point, there's no like formal rebel resistance. Like it's all these kinds of little factions, I would say,
Right.
that are
They're
starting to
they're
splinter off.
cells. They're rebel
Yeah,
cells,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's what they
Rebel
call them
cells.
in Rebel Star Wars Rebels too, and that's interestingly enough also how we refer to terrorist groups as cells, because the difference between being a terrorist and being a revolutionary hero is often just a matter of perspective and who is telling the story. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
right.
I mean, like the ISB people, I'm pretty sure they call these guys terrorists at some point or another in the show, right? They
I'm
have
pretty sure they do. Yeah. I would be
um
surprised if they didn't.
yeah, but I love the idea of a senator secretly trying to fund this rebellion while also maintaining her front as a member of high society. And I love the lines in the trailer, but it's just her delivery of it is so good. She's like, if they think I'm a nuisance, then they won't pay attention to what I'm really doing. And
Mhm.
I think it's take Holma. And it's like, what are you doing? It's like building the money, like moving the money. It's like that's such a cool, different side of Star Wars that we have never seen before. And it's just
Mhm.
like just her and Take Homa like walking through those parties, just whispering about insurrection, just out of earshot of all these other characters.
Mhm.
Is so it's so interesting. And I love that there's this one shot, I think about 2/3 of the way through the season. It's when Vel, her cousin, we find out halfway through the
Yep.
season, comes to visit her, and it's after she walks Vel out, and she's standing by herself in the center of the frame. And there's a doorway between the
Mhm.
camera and her, and a doorway on the other side. And we see like just through the cinematography, like feeding into the narrative, we've gotten like she's completely alone because she's crossed that first threshold. She is not a loyalist. Her husband and her daughter seem to be, so she cannot connect with them anymore. But she's also not willing to cross that second threshold and be a rebel yet,
Mhm.
because she's uncomfortable with the violence that Luthen is carrying out. And it's like she's a lib basically. Like she's not ready to take that step into revolutionary action yet. So we will
Yeah.
see that in the future from her. Obviously, we know where she ends up, but it's just such a great shot. And
Yes.
it's just good cinematography. The show has great cinematography throughout, but that one stood out to me.
No, yeah. I think that's like one of the best like shots in the entire show because it's just
Mhm,
like that visual symbolism is so apropos for the
mhm,
time. And yeah, just kind of like what you were saying, it does kind of represent where she's at in her like little game there, but it's also like, she's like in the middle of her front too. Like she's not quite found out, she's not fully on one side or the other yet. She's like
mhm.
in the middle, and yeah,
Yeah.
she's entirely alone. So but yeah, I think Mon Mothma as a character is such a fantastic addition to the series,
Mhm.
and it's definitely giving some new life to what it means to be a rebel and what the rebellion
Yeah.
was and is.
Mhm,
And I just love that like the whole time, she's like giving off this front of being so poised and in
mhm,
control and like high class, upper
mhm.
society. But then like, behind the scenes, she's like literally grasping at straws to cover all of
Yeah.
her bases. Like she's
Mhm.
trying so hard. She's like looking for all these kinds of like sources of funding, and it's just not really working for her. And then she's got this terrible decision, I think, as the series progresses of like,
Oh, yeah.
I've got this source of funding now, but it also means I kind of have to, give my
To
daughter,
marry my daughter off to
yeah,
this
marry my
guy.
daughter off.
Yeah.
And it's like it's kind of a fucked situation. And it's
Mhm.
like, well, what do you value more, your family or the future?
Yeah, well, and that's a theme that runs through the whole show with all these relationships is the rebellion comes first, right? We have multiple characters saying that. It's like
Hmm.
the rebellion comes first, we take what's left. And I
Yeah.
think as fucked up as it is, Mon Mothma making the choice to um introduce her daughter to this boy, knowing that they are going to be married, is her finally facing the music. Like and there is a line in Rogue One where Cassian is like telling Jin, it's like suddenly the rebellion is real for you. Like there is a point of no return. And Mon Mothma, I think, didn't realize she was at that point in the earlier parts of the show, and then realizes very quickly, no, we're doing this. Because remember, she's talking to Luthen, and she's like, I thought we were building a network. He's like, it's up. It grows or it dies. Like, it's just happening now.
Yeah.
And Luthen, we didn't even put notes about him really in here, but he's such an interesting character too, because he has that double life, and he is an accelerationist, which is a very interesting type of character to put in Star Wars. If you don't know what an accelerationist is, it is usually someone of left-leaning persuasion who is under the belief that if things get so bad that it will cause the system to break, and there will be a revolution. That is what Luthen is playing into. And during the 2016 election, there were a lot of accelerationists who were like, oh, if Trump gets elected, like, he'll fuck up so badly that it'll break down and we'll have a communist utopia. No, that didn't happen. Accelerationism is not really that smart, in my opinion. But it is interesting that we have a character like that in Star Wars now. And we have Saw Gerrera talking about all these different factions of rebels, and it really plays into that very real element of left-wing infighting that we see all of the time. There are so many people who are like leftier than thou and won't work with you or support you if you don't agree entirely with them. And it's like, it's a real problem for progressive people in the real world, because we can't coalition build if we can't band together. And the rebellion in Andor is at that stage. They aren't banding together because they're broken apart on these little nuanced differences of what they believe.
Yeah. I've got some notes on that later, but I appreciated Luthen as a character. I think he's very strong, and I appreciate the monologue he had. I think it was so like good. Episode like 10 or something like that.
When he's third to last episode or something.
Talking to his spy, it was like, oh, that is just so breathtaking. It was just excellent. But I also really appreciated seeing Saw Gerrera return to the screen. Forrest Whitaker back in the role. He's I don't think that his character got enough screen time in Rogue One.
No, he's kind of silly in that movie.
And then he just kind of stands there and dies, and he's got this breathing respirator thing, and that's never explained. And it's like, why does he have this limp? And it's like, they just didn't give him enough time to breathe on screen. And we've gotten some iterations of him throughout like Clone Wars and stuff like that. So we get to see him as a younger guy.
And Rebels too. We see him.
Yes, in Rebels. I forgot about that. But it is nice to see him back on screen and kind of bring some weight to this character. He's not kind of like this old lethargic guy who's about to die. He's like, no, I'm fuck the Empire. And it's very interesting to see, like, like we were just saying, these different rebel cells and factions kind of arguing over strategy. Guerrera's ideology is like so unique in a world of its own, where it's just like I think he's just like honestly kind of an anarchist to some degree.
I think I think he is too, because he's with the Republic in the Clone Wars. I remember that. But it's he has these. He's a separatist. It's like, he's a neo-Republican. I don't want to work with these people. And it's like, that's the infighting angle. But Saw Gerrera has and I have a note on it later on, but some people pointed out it's weird seeing people celebrate Luthen when Saw Gerrera has the same type of mentality, but people have been shitting on him for years. And I think the implication they were trying to make is Saw is black, Luthen is white. And there probably is some racism in the different responses to those characters, but also in addition to that, I think the way Saw has been presented in the past has always been as this like deranged fringe guy. And part of that is because in Rogue One, he's just like, his paranoia has taken him too far. He's too far gone, right? But then when we see him again in Rebels, like, Rebels is a show for 8 to 10-year-olds about Jedi. And Kanan even has the line, it's not just why we fight, but how we fight, or something like that. So Saw is positioned in opposition to that ideal in a children's show. This show is more adult oriented. So we are able to see the necessity of someone like Saw Gerrera and like Luthen, because the reality of a revolution like this is that, like, when you're fighting against the fascist galactic empire, you don't have the luxury of choosing how to fight. You just have to fight. and they're going to play dirty, so you have to as well, pretty much. And that's what Luthen is all about. Saw Gerrera too, but Luthen is very much willing to cross a lot of lines to maintain the movement.
Yeah, they're very interesting. Rebels just in general, rebel leaders too. And while there is some overlap, I think, between Gerrera and
Luthen,
thank you. They're not entirely aligned, and you kind of see that when they're talking about the we're kind of jumping ahead here, but like when they're talking about how they have to sacrifice this guy to like keep the scheme going. Yeah. They have to keep the scheme going with ISB to make sure that like they don't know that they know.
Right.
It's like this kind of like this info, like it's just kind of like a war of like information between these like between the Empire and the Rebellion. And Luthen's totally fine with sacrificing this leader of like a little rebel cell because it keeps the cause alive. But you can see this interesting ideological struggle on screen between Whitaker and
Skarsgård.
Skarsgård, yeah, it's very interesting to see them talk about that. And it's just like, I think that these actors are also both so phenomenal.
They're great.
Like,
yeah, they're so good.
The line delivery is excellent. And before we kind of moved on from Mon Mothma, but I just want to plug that actress as well. I think it's pronounced Genevieve O'Reilly. She was in this really excellent crime thriller that I saw like a year or two ago that I would really recommend, called The Fall.
Okay.
It's really cool. Not a super satisfying ending, but it's still very, very interesting. And she plays like kind of the chief lead detective.
Okay.
So she's
cool.
I really like that actress too. So just fantastic cast there. Should we switch gears and talk about some of these Imperial characters?
Yeah, I think we should. Because this show gives a lot more depth to the Empire than we're used to in the films, at least. And I think that's good. But there is a distinction I want to make, because a lot of ancillary Star Wars material that's come out since the Disney acquisition has made efforts to humanize the Empire, and I haven't loved the way they've gone about doing that. Like there was this like Lost Stars book from several years ago now, where it's like these two young people are like, they grew up together, they're in love, and they join the Empire, and then one of them defects to the rebellion. But then he's like super sad because he had a bunch of friends on the Death Star and Luke blew it up. It's like, oh no. And then the girl stays with the Empire all the way through the end. And the book wants me to feel sympathy for her and like be like, oh, you have to stay and you have to do this. It's like, no, you don't. This is the Empire. And I don't need emotional complications about Luke blowing up the Death Star. You signed up for a job on a Death Star. Fuck you. Like, I don't care if you die.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You are literally on a floating thing in space called the Death Star.
Yeah. It's like and there's a scene after it blows up Alderaan in the book. Like a bunch of the like main characters are sitting there. It's like, I can't believe the Empire would do this. It's like, what the fuck do you think you're doing? What are you doing here? Like,
yeah.
And there was a lot of that, and trying to like make it more morally gray when I don't think it was appropriate for that story. So I like the way Andor does it, because it treats all of these Imperial characters as real full people, but it also is like, but they're Nazis and it's cool that they're gonna die. Like,
oh yeah,
it's like they are evil. Like, let's talk about Deidre on that note. Like,
yes, Deidre is crazy bitch Nazi for sure. She's cruel, she's unsympathetic. It's delightful to watch. Like there are certainly like points throughout the series where it's just kind of like, yeah, I want to see her like continue to climb this ladder
exactly.
And she's got her kind of like own little like storyline for sure. And I think there are moments where the story is structured in a way where you start to kind of root for her a little bit, of like, yes, I want to see you do a little bit better. I want you to kind of like put that guy in his place, like in the ISB. But at the end of the day, she is still a Nazi. She's still a totally fucked up Imperial loyalist who works for like the worst fucking people
She
imaginable.
works for the Empire's CIA is what the ISB is pretty much. But it's
Mm-hmm.
but Denise Scow, who plays her, said something about halfway through the season. I think she's like, Gilroy did this great thing where you root for her and you want her to succeed because she's in this organization and people are looking down on her. But then she's like a Nazi, and you're reminded of that at a certain point because. And she's right, because for the first couple episodes we see her, she is the protagonist of her own storyline, and it's very interesting, and it makes you root for her. But then, as soon as she crosses paths with one of our actual protagonists, Bix, I got more supporting character, but still,
Yeah.
then it's like, oh no, this woman succeeding is putting a character we like in grave danger. And then she presides over this torture and is just like loving it so much. You're reminded of how awful this person is.
Yeah,
And
it's ridiculous because like she doesn't have very many redeeming qualities besides like her ambition
right.
and like her drive for success. Like those ones I think a lot of people can connect with. But then as
Mm-hmm.
soon as she turns cruel and starts torturing people or is, scheming about like, oh, let's set the ship adrift and we'll make it look like they escaped, and then the
Mm-hmm.
rebels will come and check it out and then we'll fucking kill them all. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
Jesus Christ, you are
Yeah.
evil. Only an evil person would think of that plan. Like,
Yeah. It does such a great job because it just lulls you into this thing. It's like, oh yeah, you go, teacher. It's like, wait, what am I doing? Why am I rooting for this fucking asshole? And then it hits you with it. But just so delightfully awful. But she always feels like a real person. Like you can
mhm.
understand how someone could come to be like her growing up in the society she's in and the her role within it, right? And then that's a lot of people in real life too. Like they are evil and serving evil organizations, but like they didn't start that way necessarily. Like no one is born a villain. You become that. You're a product of your environment and the choices you make. And she is
True.
that. Um
Yeah,
but
that's so true.
yeah.
And I think another product of their environment too, is our other kind of main Imperial person to focus on, Cyril
Cyril
Karn.
Karn.
Cyril, he's got mad mom eat issues. You could tell that as I think as soon as he hits the screen that
Mm-hmm.
he's like he feels like he wants to be recognized and he wants
Yeah.
to do great things, but at the same time, he is a product of his environment. His mom certainly was like set these huge expectations on him. And in this bustling world of Coruscant, if you haven't known any other life, you've grown up on Coruscant,
Uh-huh.
kind of on the lower levels of Coruscant too. Like he's not up
Yeah.
top, he's like definitely down there, not
Mm-hmm.
like base,
Yeah,
not
he
like
still
bottom
gets
level
some
for sure.
sunlight, but not a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like it must it does kind of help you sympathize a little bit with him of like, well, yeah, if I kind of lived in that environment, it would feel impossible for me to go against the grain or even consider it. It would be
Right,
like,
yeah.
I need my moment in the
Okay.
spotlight. I'm kind of, and he's definitely motivated by his ambition to be
He
recognized
he has a
and
love
kind
of
of,
order and like
yes,
law. And
yes.
yeah, and it well, and this ties into him and Deidre, so I want to mention it. So like it's just another point of humanization for these Imperial characters. Like Deidre is fucking horrible, obviously,
Hmm.
but when she realizes that Cyril is stalking her, like you
Yeah.
sympathize for her in that moment because that is a truly terrifying thing that people deal with all the time. And
Yes.
evil fascist CIA lady or not, like that's haunting. And that is another element of Cyril. Like he is a loser incel stalker. But
Yeah.
he I think he's also a commentary on how someone like that who is a directionless loser who craves order can be weaponized by fascism into becoming extremely violent.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
he has no one who really gives a shit about him. I think his mom is more concerned with how he reflects on her than anything else.
Hmm.
And he just like his only ambition is to like be a cop.
Yeah. To like, yeah. I think he's like, he kind of feels a little self-righteous at times
Hmm.
in his drive. Like, I think he's searching for this kind of glory and this recognition. And after he just like fails so miserably with Linus at the start,
Hmm.
I think he does kind of transition to this drive for redemption, and he's driven by his own self-righteousness there. But yeah, he's just such a fucking loser, and
Yeah.
it's
I
so
love it.
interesting.
It's so funny how much like at every front he's a loser. And even in the end, there's that moment where in when the riots are starting on Ferrex, or the revolution, I guess. Um
Hmm.
it's he like he's smart, and he like saves Deidre, and then they get into the little room and she realizes him, and like in a movie where Cyril and Deidre were the good guys, that would be like a really romantic moment for them, right? Like we've seen it
Hmm.
all the time. But with these two, they're just like weird Nazis, and you can tell she's kind of like, oh fuck, god damn it, I have to deal with this guy again now because he saved my ass. And like
Hmm.
you just know she's gonna do something nice for him. She's gonna get him set up in the ISB or whatever, and then she's gonna just ghost him. That's what's gonna happen because she doesn't like him because he's fucking weird. And who would like him? Like, and it's just
Yeah.
a funny inversion of that trope. Guy saves the girl from the scary people, and then they're just in this room together with no chemistry at all. Just like, what do we do now?
Yeah, right. It's such a weird dynamic. And I really appreciate too, like throughout the series, he's got his little counterpart Linus
Hmm.
there with him. Like I like their friendship. It's kind of silly and weird, and
Yeah.
like it's definitely like kind of niche too, because like they're both obviously admirers of law and order, and
Hmm.
that kind of like military stuff. So they obviously kind of have similar minds of how this stuff works. But I I just appreciate any chance I get to see them on screen because I think they just work really well together.
Yeah. I love the scene where he like hands his hat silently across to him. But I did see this pointed out online, and I kind of agree. At the end of the finale, after Marva's speech and the like protesting and fighting starts,
Hmm.
um, we go back to Linus in the aftermath, and he's just sitting there sad. And someone pointed out it's like she got to him. Something she said registered with
Oh,
him. And
yeah.
I really like that read that maybe he realized like I'm on the wrong side. And I don't know if that's what they were going for, but it really seemed like he was contemplating what he'd been doing, and that would be very interesting if we see him in season 2 and he is not for the Empire anymore.
That's a great read. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Because I don't think Cyril will have any redemption, nor does he deserve it. Same
Yeah,
with Deidre. Um, but this guy, I think there's room for that. And I would be interested to see. But
I
speaking of the
agree.
Empire some more, let's talk about the ISB, the Imperial Security Bureau. Um,
Yes.
we see Deidre as our point of view character into here. We get the return of Admiral Yaloran from the Clone Wars and Rebels and the original
Oh,
Star Wars.
yes. Hmm.
Um, and then we also get Qyburn from Game of Thrones as
Yes.
the
I
head
love
of that
that
little
guy.
council. He was great too. What a great like small character. He's um but it's so fun to get an inside look at how the Empire's intelligence operation works. And they're straight to the point.
Hmm.
And it's like it's very direct. They're cold and efficient in the way they talk. There's no considering the humanity of their enemies outside of what they need to consider to do their jobs. It's very interesting to watch them communicate with each other.
Yes, I agree. It felt very akin to, the dialogue from A New Hope. Like you think back to like the scenes
The
on like the Death
council, yeah.
Star, and like how they're just kind of talking to each other, and they're just like so quick and decisive, and it's like the dialogue in this series definitely felt reflective of that in the ISB, which I really
Hmm.
appreciated. It just kind of like made it more uniform across the empire of like, okay, so this is how they mostly operate. They're very like straight and to the point, and I
Yeah.
appreciated that. That was nice continuity there. And I'll just also say that I appreciate how Andor gave some much needed depth to these faceless goons that have
Yeah.
been, manning the empire for X amount of years, like centuries, man. These guys have just been like so like just they just felt like copy and paste, all the
Mhm.
stormtroopers. It's like it doesn't matter if they die, it doesn't matter if these guys die, like they don't have any family or friends, or like they're just kind of faceless people that we're not supposed to
Uh-huh.
have any emotional attachment to. And rightfully so, because they're Nazis.
They're Nazis. um,
So
but
yeah.
but you're right. And Nemec, who we'll talk about in a bit, he mentions this in his manifesto that like oppression takes like constant vigilance. You have to work really hard because it's so unnatural, right? And the we are seeing the nature of that vigilance here because I mean he's right. They have an unnatural control over the galaxy, and that has to be maintained by levels and levels of bureaucracy and people carrying out the orders of the emperor. Um, and they even mention in A New Hope, they kind of touch on it when the Senate gets dissolved, and they're like, well, how will the emperor maintain control of the systems? And it's like the governors will take control now, but it's bigger than that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and what's that great uh neighbor kind neighbor Nazi quote? Let me see if I can find it. It's a great quote that's really kind of scary. Nas.
No.
Let's see. Uh, fuck. Never mind. I think it basically a summary of it. It's like a lot of the best Nazis were like great neighbors, right? They were kind and nice people, and they just didn't think about politics all that much. And so they turned the other way when the Nazis were like carrying out their horrible things. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
those are the most important type of Nazi because without them, the regime cannot succeed. And that's what I think this show is talking about in a lot of ways. It's like if you are in the presence of evil and you do nothing, you are sanctioning that evil. And
Mm-hmm.
that is true in the real world, and that's true in the world of Star Wars. And that is a big part of what Cassian's journey is about in this show too, and
Absolutely.
a lot of characters. But fascism also depends on other things, which we'll talk about in the Ferrex arc. But let's talk about Cassian himself a little bit. We're almost an hour in, and we haven't talked about our main character much at all.
That's okay.
But
We're getting to it. Yeah.
yeah, Diego Luna is, of course, great. Again, his performance in Rogue One was very good as well, even though he had limited material, but he's really good here.
Yes.
Fun anecdote that he shared in an interview recently, because he's Mexican, so he grew up watching Star Wars in Spanish.
Oh
And
yeah.
in the Spanish version of Star Wars, R2D2 is called Arturito.
Oh
And
yes.
in Spanish, and he said until he was 15, because of that, he thought R2D2's name was Little Arthur because Arturito means Little Arthur. I just think that's really funny.
Oh, that's cute.
But this show, Cassian's arc, is about radicalization, right? He
Yeah.
already hates the Empire, but he's not a rebel yet. And this show is about it really takes its time diving like punching into your brain what it takes for someone to go from someone who just hates the government to someone who takes violent action against that same government.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that his character journey in this sort of in some ways is a beefier version of Finn's arc in The Last Jedi. Because Finn starts The Last Jedi
Mm-hmm.
against the First Order, but he's not on board with the Resistance just yet. And then over the course of the movie, he finds out the importance of fighting for the Resistance. I think it's done better here.
Yeah.
I like Finn's arc in The Last Jedi, but I do think that storyline is the weakest part of the movie. In terms of execution, not idea. But
Yeah.
Cassian, through these various experiences across these story arcs, is given more and more reason to join the rebellion, and we know eventually where that leads him. But yeah, so what did you think about Cassian, his arc throughout?
I really enjoyed it. And I think this is something that we'll harp on it again and again with Star Wars stuff is like,
Mm-hmm.
just giving it more or exploring it more. And I feel like we are so used to just going back to like a similar formula, similar places, similar
Mm-hmm.
characters over and over again. And I think what's great about this series too is that it gives us a whole fresh new batch of it's just a whole fresh new cast. Like we haven't seen any of these people before except for like Mon Mothma and Cassian. That's it.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
And so, I think what really resonated with me was the emotional connections that Cassian had with everyone else and
Hmm.
how those were established. Like, we'll talk about this later, but I really did kind of tear up when his mother passed away in
Hmm.
the series.
When
And
you see
like
the
her,
droid like B2 shaking and the coffee like
yeah,
rolling, it's so good. And he's like
it's
hiding.
yeah, it's just so great. Like how much emotion they were able to pack into these characters. And like honestly, if Cassian was just a loner from the get-go, like
Hmm.
Han Solo, I wouldn't have cared. But the
Right.
fact that he starts out with a family and then over time he kind of loses these family members and this kind of self-made family too, because he
Hmm.
was taken from his home world,
Yeah.
it was endearing and it really packed a punch for me. So I think that's kind of what I love the most about Andor's
Hmm.
portrayal. But like, I think, yeah, Diego Luna did a great job. He brought such great like weight to the character. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about him. He's just
Yeah.
phenomenal.
I mean, it's a great examination of of the process of becoming a fighter and a leader, I think.
Hmm.
Um and inspire and learning how to inspire others to follow. Like we'll talk about Kino in the Nakina 5 arc, but he Kino ultimately leads the way out, but it's Cassian who inspires him to do so. Um and I
Hmm.
think that's another element I've actually liked about the Disney era expanded material, like the shows and the books and whatever and the comics. It's like and Rogue One too. It's like in the original trilogy, which is a masterpiece, obviously, but it was Luke, Han, and Leia. They were the heroes of the rebellion, and they won the day. But it the rest of this material adds so much texture to the rebellion. It's like before Luke, there were Kanan and Ezra and Sabine and Hera and like Cassian and Jin and Luthen and all these people and Saw Gerrera and like all of these people from different cells all like getting as far as they could just so someone else can get a little bit farther. And then Luke, Han,
Hmm.
and Leia are the ones that bring it across the finish line. Like it adds this texture to the nature of rebellion that like it's not just one guy. It's
Hmm.
thousands of people giving it everything they can until it's done.
It's a
Um,
team effort. Yeah.
it's a team effort, and it's both on the large scale and on the small scale. And that leads us, I think, into our first arc that we should talk about.
Yeah.
Ferrex 1. Um, I think it does a great job of establishing Cassian and all of the Ferrex based characters like Bix and Brasso and Marva and B2. Um, and it and we also get a really good examination of the police and police overreach and violence and how fascism depends on the police and depends on corporations to maintain its power. Cyril and Linus even say that the like corporate police are the empire's first line of defense, and that is true. And the arc culminates in police officers doing some overreach, even though they were told not to, and killing an innocent person in pursuit of their guy. And then
Hmm.
in something that rarely happens, they are punished for that by Cassian and Luthen.
Yeah.
They get fucking owned, and it was so satisfying to see
Yes,
that
it was
happen. But
very satisfying. Yeah.
as all of the people in the town are like banging all the stuff and closing up the shops, like there's a solidarity between them against these people. They know they're the enemy. They're not supposed to be there. And I love Marva's line when the two guards are watching her, and she's like, it gets to you, doesn't it? It's like, but you really have to worry about when it stops. And he's like, why? What
Hmm.
happens when it stops? It's like a reckoning. It's so good. It's
Yeah.
so
She
awesome.
had some of the best dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I really liked about the Ferrex arc too, it wasn't a huge kind of thing, but it was just Andor's like origin story.
Yeah.
Like he basically was a tribal member on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the exact name of it right now.
Oh,
But
I can't
yeah,
remember either. But
doesn't matter to me. It's a planet in Star Wars,
yeah.
and the whole reason why he got kind of like taken off of the planet was because him and his tribe investigated this crash, and
Hmm.
then he got too curious and went inside, and then that's where he met Marva and can't remember the other guy's name.
Clem.
Clem, thank
'Cause
you.
that's what he
And
names himself as in Aldani. Clem.
oh right, yes, Clem. Uh, oh, that's very endearing. And but I appreciated that we got that kind of glimpse into that kind of civilization, and then
Yeah.
also just like I think that they always kind of reference it throughout the series of like, yeah, you can't blame yourself for like the destruction of your planet or the genocide of your people or stuff like that, or like, it's like you got to stop searching for your sister because she's definitely dead because
Hmm.
all of your like relatives and everyone is dead, and it's like it's because they crash landed on this planet, and then like all this shit went sideways from there,
Yeah.
and it's like just because that there were resources on that planet, the Empire just
Yeah,
pillaged it.
there was like a mining accident. Yeah, and that's why it was deserted except for those kids.
Yeah, and it's just like it's just crazy to think that like that would that would happen, but that is kind of how it's happened under colonialist rule, for centuries and centuries. We just go in, take all the resources, and leave.
Yeah. But I do love that you mentioned the flashbacks to him as a kid, because the end of the arc, when we're cutting back and forth between Luthen and Cassian escaping, and Marva, Clem, and little Cassian flying off, like there was just such emotional like strength in that scene, and it really felt like, oh, we are leaping off into the adventure now. We've had our introductory phase and we're off. We're going. It felt so
Hmm.
good. And I think we spent just enough time with the Ferrix based characters of Bix, Brasso, Marva, B2 Emo, to care enough about them to be excited when we see them again, because we don't see them for the Aldani arc, I don't think, at all, right?
Yeah, I don't think so.
And it's not until Deidre goes to Ferrix that we start seeing them again. I could be misremembering exactly when it is.
Yeah, I can't remember
But
entirely.
we don't see them for a little bit. And at first I was like, oh no, are we not going to see them anymore? I like these people. But no, they're very important for the rest of the show. And we'll talk about that. But
Yeah.
speaking of colonialism, we should talk about the Aldani arc, because that is a big part of that.
Yes. So yeah, that after I think it's the third episode or something like that, they
Yeah.
transition to the Aldani arc, and then
Hmm.
there's like 3 or 4 episodes of basically this heist that they're going to be doing on the planet of Aldani, where they're
Yeah.
stealing the entirely quarterly payroll for a
Whole sector.
sector of the Empire. Who knows how fucking big a sector is? Um, but apparently it's a big deal taking all that
Yes.
money,
Oh yeah.
and I would be pissed too if I didn't get paid for my work. So that I think is a very smart thing to take, because um, you know just everyone loves money and everyone needs it. So
Yeah.
it's a very smart thing to steal. But this is a very interesting arc. And I think one of the things that I really like about it is that we get this diversity of characters involved in this heist,
Hmm.
and it's it's kind of something we touched on earlier with the rebel factions and the rebel cells and everything. But like, if you think of the Empire, I think when you think back to the original trilogy, I think you imagine tons and tons of people aligned in a single vision to destroy the Empire and kind of rebel it,
Yes.
overthrow it, and all that stuff. But we know that that's not the case with everyone.
Right.
Even in the original trilogy, Han was kind of more of a hired gun who
Hmm.
helped rescue the princess, and then was just kind of around. And then he was like, oh, "Okay, I guess I'll save the day,"
Yeah.
and comes in at the last minute and
Well, he
helps
fucking
out.
leaves. He pieces out. He's not
Exactly.
even
Yeah, he
part of it.
leaves.
Yeah.
He
But
leaves and he
it
comes back. Yeah.
but you're touching on something that's very true, and it was taken for granted when we were kids watching these movies, but they're called the Rebel Alliance. That implies that they are an alliance of different rebel factions. So
Hmm.
when we pick up with the rebellion in the movie, the Rebel Alliance has been formed. That doesn't exist yet. There are still these different groups of people doing different things. And
Yeah.
Cassian is brought in by Luthen to be like the seventh man on this crew that has been there for 5 months planning this heist, and they are not happy about it at all.
Yeah.
They are pissed. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. There's some distrust and concern when Andor's brought on, and it's it is kind of an interesting dynamic. And on this crew too, you have a few of these like hired mercs, or like people that are kind of just in it because they
yeah,
have like
Skeen.
yeah, they want some money or something, like
Hmm.
you're not very clear on what their motivations are. And then you have some former or current Imperial officers, you know, some people that are still in it, and they're the inside man, and then you have some diehard rebels, and so it's kind of this mix of people. Everyone's got a different reason for being there, and I thought that was
Right.
just so interesting to explore those different characters there.
Yeah, and you're right, because we are following Cassian's radicalization story, but every person there had their own as well. And we are just seeing them as part of his story, but they all had their own journey to get to that point, which is very interesting. And we also, but like I mentioned, colonialism, this arc touches on imperialism and colonialism, and the concept of soft power. The Empire is not violent to the Aldani people, but they are consciously working to erase their culture. They blocked up the river with that dam that went by a sacred temple, and they're trying to diminish the ritual, and they're going to demolish the temple to build a landing zone or whatever there, right? And we see the Empire using tactics like offering alcohol and comfort and stuff like that to sort of dissuade the Aldani from coming to the ceremony. And it's similar to like European colonists used to give alcohol to the Native Americans to sort of give themselves an advantage in trading with them, because the Native Americans didn't have alcohol at that time, apparently, and so they would get them drunk and manipulate them. Similar thing there. And there was a concerted effort by European colonists to erase Native American cultures when they were colonizing, right? So that's another, like, see what we're talking about, how this show has things to say. It's about things. It's
got some messages, and it's got some very true things to say about the world.
But
I appreciate you bringing that up, the soft power. That didn't entirely resonate with me, so I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, but it initially transitioning this arc, I thought was just a tiny bit jarring, because as I talked about at the end of the first arc, there's that great feeling of momentum we're getting as we're leaving Ferrix. And it felt a little weird. It's like, oh, we're starting a new journey with a new cast of characters. We got to get to know all these people. But that quickly washed away, because these characters are interesting and they have an interesting plan. And like we get Nimic, we get Skeen, we get Vel, we get what's Vel's girlfriend's name?
I can't remember.
Whatever, but we get the rest of them. And they're all interesting. They're just as interesting as anybody else. And we start building up to this heist, right? It's and I mean, in perfect heist fashion, right? Like it's escalating stakes as we find out new information. And I touched on it, but the arc gives us an actual gay couple, and they're prevalent enough to where they can't just be edited out for foreign markets. So yay,
kudos.
And they didn't like pat themselves on the back for it or do any premature marketing like years ago when they announced like, we're gonna hire so many female directors for Star Wars, and then just didn't do that for like 5 years.
Classic.
Here's a lesson for corporations: if you want to be celebrated for being inclusive and progressive, just be that. Don't say you're gonna be that. Just do it. And then people will recognize it. Although we also recognize you're only doing it because you've recognized that's the profitable thing to do. But
need that money.
But this relationship was fully developed, and they're not like the gay couple. They're just two people who are in love and together who happen to be of the same sex. That's it.
Yeah. And they're both very committed to the cause too. Yes, Cinta and Val. They're very, very
Cinta,
cool
thank
characters.
You.
Yeah,
they are.
I had to look that up. I couldn't remember.
Yeah. And I want to clarify what I meant by that, by the way. I meant that being gay is not their whole personality, which is a trap that a lot of more amateurish writers fall into when they are trying to be more inclusive. It's like, oh, we've got the gay guy or we've got the black guy, and that is all they are. Not the case here. Great stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I get you there. And I think one of the other characters that I really liked here too was Nemec. We kind of touched on him before. He's the young, wistful kind of philosopher to a certain extent, the young kind of manifesto writer. If he was a communist, he would be Karl Marx, kind of deal. Like he's
an anarchist for sure.
Yeah, he's an anarchist, and he would just spit out these like amazing lines, like these amazing thoughts really quickly.
Hmm.
It's just like, yeah, as soon as they like commit this atrocity, they commit another one, and it's like it's hard to keep up,
Right.
and they're just stripping our rights, and
Yeah.
it's there was so much truth behind that character. And I honestly also
Yeah.
loved the actor of it too.
Hmm.
Again, I just have to plug another show, The End of the Fucking World.
Okay.
Alex Lother, he plays the protagonist in it, and he's
Cool.
very fucking good. It's such a fun fucking show, so please go watch that. But Nemec
Cool.
is awesome character. I really enjoyed
Yeah.
him.
And I do love that line that he says, it's like it's easier to hide behind 40 atrocities than one single incident,
Yeah.
because it's so fucking true. They're like, just today we have access to so much information, but there's so much bad happening in the world. Like every day a new horrible thing is going on. Like it's like we've barely had time to process the last mass shooting in America before there's another one. And it's like you
Yes.
don't even have time to get angry before there's something else. And um and it's a lot of it is deliberate. Some of it isn't. Some of it is just the way things work. The world is big. There are lots of forces competing against each other all the time. But you can't you can't make a cohesive message against something when the thing you're fighting against is moving so quickly that you can't keep up with what they're doing. And so
Yeah.
it's such a brilliant sentiment for this show to have. And it's like, it is right. It's like, just allow tons of crises to happen all the time. And they'll never be able to keep up with you. But on the flip side of that, in his manifesto towards the end, he kind of flips it on its head. It's like small acts of insurrection are happening like all across the galaxy every day. And what is the line? It's like, eventually there will be one too many and it all come crashing down. So like it goes both ways. And it's so great because someone needs to do like an edit of that speech under like footage of the original trilogy and Rogue One and this show, because it's like it's right. It's like that sentiment culminates in the Death Star plans getting to Princess Leia and Luke firing
Hmm.
that shot. Like, and then eventually with Vader shucking the Emperor down a mine shaft.
Yeah. Go
but
Vader.
but it's like, and that's what we were talking about earlier. It's like the extra texture of the revolution, right? It's all these acts of insurrection culminate in one guy getting a 1 in a million shot to save the rebels, and he does it.
Yeah.
But
It's
he only
crazy.
got there because of all of these people doing all this stuff. It's so cool.
Yeah. It's a snowball effect. Everyone's got to contribute, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
very interesting, and yeah, I appreciate that character, and I really like this arc too because it just was a master class of building tension. I
Mm-hmm.
think the whole time, even that whole heist episode, they just spent one whole episode on the heist, and I think I feel like I was on the edge of my
Edge of my
seat the entire
same.
time
Yeah.
because it was just so good. Like they just built it up, and I just cared about these characters, and I was like, what's gonna fuck up? How's this gonna fuck up? What's gonna
Yeah.
happen? And is gonna
And
like really screw them?
just how the show is humanizing the Imperial characters we mentioned. It humanizes our rebel characters too. Like in more traditional movies or shows, I guess, when they're in a heist, like someone will be like, "Are we a go?" They'll be like, "Go." But in this, Vel hesitates, like almost to a critical failure point of hesitation, because she's fucking scared, because
Yeah,
she knows, like, I'm gonna give this order, and then if we all die, it's because I gave this order. Like, and it's so human and good. um
yeah,
and then when you see the vault and the way they have to load it too, that just skyrockets attention, because it's like there's so much to carry and you're
yes.
carrying it like one thing at a time. This is not going to work.
It is insane the amount of work they got to do there. It's very great. Yeah, that whole episode is just phenomenal, and I really appreciate the visual effects too.
Mhm.
That it's called the Eye,
The eye,
right?
yeah,
The
the
Eye,
eye of
the thing in the
Aldani.
sky.
Hmm.
Yeah, I thought that was really pretty, and then like just like the, you know, it's. I think it's been a while since like a Star Wars visual was like really wow, that was impressive. Like just the
Hmm.
visual aesthetic of it, and that one was like
I
it was
think
up
since
there.
the Holdo maneuver, probably that was the last visual
Yeah, the big
moment in.
gasp. Hmm.
Yeah, that was, because I don't know if you remember in the theater, but like the movie goes silent and
Yep.
everybody was like,
Yeah, it just
um
hits you like, oh my god,
it's like
that's incredible.
it's that's the last time before this that there was like something genuinely revolutionary new in Star Wars that looked visually unlike anything they'd done before. But then you get your own gasp moment in this episode, because as Cassian pumps the gas, the fucking loot crush his Nemec, and you can just, oh my god.
That as soon as that happened, I was like,
No,
it knocked the air out of me.
Yeah, I rewatched it with my family when they were here over the holidays, and I could hear my sister just go like, oh, like it hits, because it's just tiny little inversions of things we expect from this type of story, right? It's like the triumphant, like, boom, we're out of here. No, crush your friend. And he survives for a bit, but
not long enough.
Not long enough. Well, he survives long enough to get out of there, and then he dies on the operating table, which again is another subversion, right? Like, it seems like he died. He didn't. He's able to get him out of there, and you think, oh, it's Star Wars, it's fantasy. They could say, no, he dies.
He'll survive. Yeah.
And then skiing at the end, it's like, we could just split the money, man. And Cassian just guns him down.
Yeah, that was an interesting moment too. Like, that's Cassian's thing, huh? Like, just gunning people down.
Yeah,
that's in a quick second. The
first thing we ever saw him do in Rogue One was like kill his informant when he realized he was gonna get caught.
Yeah, he was like, "Fuck this! I gotta get out of here."
Yeah, I gotta climb, and your leg is broken.
That's his gig. He just kills people at a moment's notice. I love it.
Yeah, but this arc. And this arc is interesting because it kind of like has a little epilogue, a 4th episode epilogue, where he goes back home to Ferrix. He checks back in. He pays everybody back. He tries to get Marva to come with him. She doesn't, because she's inspired by the heist, and she's ready to fight in the way that she can. Right. So but she and everybody knows that he has to go. Right. So he goes to like Space Miami. And he's just the biggest bullshit, right? He's just walking to go get some snacks or something, and then for no reason they're like, you look suspicious, 6 years in prison.
Yeah, he gets arrested for a crime that he did not commit, and he has no idea what the fuck it is, and it's just like, what the fuck kind of bullshit is this? And that's the kind of shit you got to deal with when you live in a fascist state. Like,
just a police state. There was a video.
Police state. Yeah.
There was a video I was watching this afternoon. It was this lady, just got pulled over and arrested because her husband was in the hospital, and she was distracted and didn't realize the cop was trying to pull her over. So she kept going for like 4 more blocks. Then he just took her to fucking jail. He just arrested her on the spot while she's like in tears about her husband being in the hospital. He just takes her to jail, and he's like, I don't believe you that you didn't know I was following you. You're lying to me. You're going to jail. And I think that officer is being investigated now, fortunately. But
Good.
Yeah. But yeah, he just goes to this prison, which is the best part of the show, maybe.
I think it's one of the best arcs of the show. And I mean, I think all the arcs are phenomenal. They've all got their great points. Like, this one's got Andy Serkis. Who doesn't love Andy Serkis? He's fantastic. But I also love this arc because it's got some multi-layered commentary in there, which we'll talk about in just a second. But I want to say, this is it's just interesting to get an insight into this part of Star Wars. Again, we've got it with the politics, with Mon Mothma, and then we got this other stuff with the little rebel cells kind of fighting together and helping out and coming together and doing these things. But then, we've never even gone to like a prison before. We've just been to the jail cell on like the Death Star,
like Jabba's palace or something.
Yeah, or Jabba's palace, like, very kind of like grimy, or these interesting environments, but like, you never really know what happens to the real prisoners. And so it was just kind of nice that we got to go to this new location and see how the Imperial War Machine is exploiting all these prisoners and just turning them into just like free labor, like a source of free labor. This is slave labor here in this whole like 3 episode arc, 3 or 4 episodes.
Well, and just one note on the prison itself, like, a different show like The Mandalorian or the Book of Boba Fett or Obi-Wan like would do something like this. We've seen an Imperial prison on the Death Star, right? It's those black and red hallways in the hexagon shape, right? If if Nakina 5 was in one of those shows, it would have looked like that. But Andor does something different. It gives us a unique location with a whole different aesthetic, a different way of operation with the like floor. Everything is white and pristine. We get a very concrete sense of how this place works and why it works this way, which is great because, and I've said this so many times, and I think you have too, it's like, if we are going to keep getting Star Wars until the end of time, which we are because it makes a lot of money, continue to expand what it means to be Star Wars. I always hate when critics or like YouTubers are like, it was good, but it just didn't feel like Star Wars. Like, shut the fuck up.
But shut the fuck up. The back of the head.
This series is almost half a century old. We need what feels like Star Wars to be broadened. It needs to be bigger, otherwise the franchise will die.
Yes,
that is
you gotta.
That is what almost happens. Like the fucking like Rise of Skywalker, and then like Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan, like 1, 2, 3 punches almost killed this franchise for a lot of people, including me. Like, I was getting to a point where I was like, okay, maybe I'm done. Maybe this isn't for me anymore. That's what happens when you only do things that feel like Star Wars, But to the more important point that you were making, yes, prison labor is slave labor. And it touches on the prison industrial complex and slave labor in prisons, which is something that we have in America to this day. It's very important to realize, and that's why we talk about like systemic injustice with the police department and stuff like that, because slavery is legal in America as long as the slave in question is a criminal and in prison, which is why police departments started arresting so many black people after the Civil War, and why they still arrest disproportionate amounts of black people. It was a means to perpetuate slavery. That's why it exists.
It's seriously fucked up, and this really does kind of, it illustrates it in the view of Star Wars. We don't know what the crimes of everyone, why they're jailed there, but the fact that Andor himself is jailed for a crime that he was not involved with.
Yeah, he was there for nothing.
On, and then like the judge was just like, you gave me some lip, so I'm changing it from 6 months to 6 years. It's like, you serious?
Well, no, it wasn't even that. Because remember, she says what you said, but threatening to add more after that. She said, you're like unlucky. Last week this was 6 months, but they just changed it to 6 years because that was part of their crackdown in response to Aldhani.
Oh, okay. That went over my head then. I thought it was just because he was talking back to her.
No, she threatened to make it bigger if he kept talking back.
Gotcha.
But that's that was a response to Aldhani, because remember, Lauren in the ISB meeting right after the heist is like, any and they even talk about like any local custom or tradition used as like a mask for insurrectionist activity. Basically all crimes are to be pursued to their highest order or whatever, stuff like that. So you get six years for fucking nothing, which is kind of haunting too, because Cassian does not survive another 6 years. He dies 5 years after this.
Right. Yeah. He's quick life.
And the thing that he is building in prison is the thing that will kill him.
That's what they were building.
Yeah, there's a post-credit scene. Did you not see that?
Oh, they were building the little robot.
The little things that connect the Death Star tiles to each other. That's what they were building.
That's very interesting.
But yeah, of course they don't get compensated, obviously. But
it's just an oversight of like fascist policies here and being part of a police state. And that's the theme of our podcast. We're just talking about fascism and all these social issues, and welcome to the podcast. But
when I describe this show to people, I'm trying to get them to listen. I say that we talk about movies and TV shows with a very healthy seasoning of like leftist politics.
I like that. Yeah, that's accurate.
And sometimes those politics are appropriate to the conversation we're having, like now, and sometimes they're not, and I'm just mad about something and talking about it.
There's always one per episode, one little rant. But yeah, I really like this arc too, the Narkina 5 arc, because we get the Andy Serkis's character Kino,
Kino
uh,
Loy.
which is such a great addition to Star Wars. And it's I just really appreciated when like I think when his character was first introduced, like everyone just started speculating like about his
Yeah.
Snoke connection, because
Oh
he
yeah.
also played Snoke, and it's like, guys, no, like it's you can play another character in the universe. It doesn't have to be connected.
Shut
But
off your fan brain. Not everything is connected. Like
yeah, it's just like
it's that line of thinking that got us Snoke in a tank in Rise of Skywalker. Okay, stop it. No more.
yeah.
Stop
We
doing
don't.
that.
Everything doesn't need to connect. It's fine.
Stop saying dumb shit because they listen to you. Stop it. But Kino Loy is so cool because when in the first episode, I thought he was going to be the antagonist of the Nakina 5 arc, because you get this archetype in a lot of stories. He is afforded a tiny amount of power, right, within this unjust system. And I expected him to wield that power against the people underneath him, but he doesn't. He's actually, he's looking out for them. And he kind of has a condensed version of Cassian's arc through the season. At the start, he's just trying to keep his head down and get through his sentence because he believes that it's the only way out, right? The one way out. But like Cassian is trying to get him on board with their prison break, and he doesn't report them. He doesn't do anything. He's just like, good luck, man. Shut the fuck up. I don't want to deal with this. And then the like most hype moment of the show up until that point, they find out that one of the guys was on level 4 and he was supposed to be transferred to a different prison, but they accidentally put him on level 2 of the same one. A word got out. They killed a whole floor. And that is what gets Kino on board. I love it's like how many guards on each level? Never more than 12. So awesome. It's just a line, but it works so well because they build these characters so thoroughly, and we understand the stakes so well, and the methods of like we get to know this location, we get to know what they need to do, why they want to do it. It's awesome.
Yeah, they build it up very well, and like you're saying, we know the premise of this whole facility, how it works. The rules are very clearly established, and it makes it easier for us to like understand how to get out, but work with them kind of through their plan, or like how they're going to get from point A to point B. And the whole prison break sequence is just phenomenal. Like,
it's so awesome.
I just love that entire scene. Like, it's just such a great sequence. But yeah,
Kino,
what a homie.
Out. Yeah, and we're gonna talk about it more in theme in theme, but Kino, it's revealed Cassian inspires him to basically prompt the jailbreak with his speech, right? And Kino participates and helps him get out, knowing the entire time he doesn't get to go because he can't swim.
Yeah. I think I saw like a tweet somewhere that like confirmed that he escaped, but at the same time, I don't really know if that's true. And either way, he's a fantastic character. And one thing that I appreciated too is that as they were escaping, they did shoot a lot of those Imperial officers, but like once they got to the command station, they like let those 2 guys live as soon as they left. They were like, we don't care anymore. Like, we're out of here. You guys go about your day.
Because they shut down the hydraulics, and he said it'll be months before we can turn the floor back on now. And Cassian's like, why the fuck do you think I would care about that? Turn it off. I love that.
Yeah. Like, it's ridiculous. But yeah,
they kill who they have to.
Yeah, they kill who they have to, but they don't kill excessively, I guess.
Right. It's more about getting out. But I do love how their plan starts coming to fruition. I love the solidarity that's formed between all of them. And I kind of morbidly love how we only get 2 confirmed escapees. We don't know what happened to the rest of them. Did they freeze to death? Probably.
Yeah, we don't know.
But it's like we've been talking about, like all of them put in maximum effort to get as far as they could, and a couple of them made it out to fight another day. And I don't know what you're referencing about Kino maybe surviving, but I can 100% confirm he died based on something we're going to talk about later on in the themes portion. So we'll get to that.
Yeah, I don't know. It must have been just a tweet I saw somewhere. It might have been irrelevant, but yeah, let's should we move on to the final arc? of
We
this
should.
season.
The final 2-episode arc, Ferrix #2, where it all comes together. A really excellent culmination of both narrative and thematic threads of the story. All of our characters converge on Ferrix, but not on each other, which is a very interesting choice. You would expect like Cyril and Cassian to have a big showdown, or Cyril and Deidre to have a big showdown, but it's like Cassian doesn't know who Deidre is. He doesn't even know Cyril is still around or involved. He has no relationship to these people, which is a very interesting and different choice. It's like, again, in contrast to Rogue One, when Krennic and Jyn Erso come face to face at the end, it rings hollow because these two people really don't have a relationship, and they haven't met throughout the entire movie. So it's like, okay, she's like, I'm the daughter of your old friend. It's like, okay.
Okay, great. That's fun. But yeah, I agree. I think just kind of drawing a brief parallel to Obi-Wan here. You know, Obi-Wan, I think of those final episodes, the main like goal of the protagonist is really to just distract the Empire of Obi-Wan, to just kind of like draw Vader away in the Empire, so the rebels can escape. So he's the focal point through and through, because the show is obviously named Obi-Wan, and like it's a 6-episode series, so it's very limited in what they can do. But you know, it's very kind of like that climactic showdown kind of story arc. And this one, it's not. Like, Andor is still a focal point in these last few episodes, but it's very spread out. Like, everyone gets their own time in the sun. Cyril, Deidre, Bix,
Brasso.
Marva, Basso. Everyone gets kind of their own spot in the sun, and the climax is really just centered around Marva's funeral, and then people literally rebelling against the Empire. Like, that is really what this climax is about. It's not about Andor, it's about the rebellion, and it's about the plan kind of coming to full fruition. You kind of see Luthen there standing too, of like, he knows what's happening down there. People are getting massacred and slaughtered, but he's like, he knows in his head, he's having that same ideological struggle he had earlier of like, this has to happen. Like, I can't go back on it now and try and save these people. These people need to die, so that way the cause can accelerate.
I'm glad you mentioned Luthen, because there are a couple, I think he's feeling a couple things like that. I think one, he's very affected by Marva's speech. I think he even has like a hint of a smile, because he's like, oh my God, it's happening. But then when the violence starts, I think it's the first time he's had to see it himself, and he is kind of realizing he's having the moment Mon Mothma had earlier in the season, where he's like, oh my God, this is real. Because he's while he knows the darkness of the things he's doing, he is so far behind the scenes that he is not confronted with the violent consequences of doing what they have to do. And now he's seeing it for the first time. And I think it does take him aback a little bit. But his resolve is strong, and he knows he's right. So he's not regretful about it, but he is kind of like, these people are kind of dying because of me.
It is. It's a very interesting episode, and it's a fantastic season finale for a lot of reasons. But yeah, this arc is fantastic, and I think Marva's speech, it really did hit home for me. Like, I teared up a little bit.
Yeah, me too.
At that speech, because it fucking got to me. We got so much screen time with her and Andor, and the relationship between them was so strongly established, and everyone just admires Marva. It's so clear by like how people were helping her in those last few episodes with her, like before she died. And those two actors who played Andor and Marva, you know, they're just so fantastic, and just like kind of delivering that stuff. Like, I actually cared when she was giving her speech. You know, I felt that kind of you know, inspiration that I think the directors were going for with this episode.
I agree. It fucking got me too. And you know the part where I started choking up was actually earlier than that. There's a point where the funeral march is going very slowly with the somber music, and they stop at the end of the street for a moment, and then the music picks up at a faster pace, and they all start marching forward quickly. That's where I started choking up, because that is the like, that's their point of no return. They are resisting in their own peaceful at this point way. And it's so cathartic and powerful. It's just this and usually in Star Wars, like, there are all these planets that we don't spend a lot of time on, and like Luke's on Tatooine, he just wants to get out of Tatooine. But on Ferrix, like, they have this whole culture of this place, and they have this tradition, and they are going to follow the tradition.
Yeah.
Fuck the empire. They're gonna do it. And that's one thing about her speech that was great. It has been confirmed that at the end of the speech she says, fight the empire. The original line was fuck the empire. Disney made them cut it. And I actually like that they cut it. Not because I disagree with the sentiment, I don't, but because it would be the first time someone says fuck in Star Wars, and it would draw, I think, too much attention away from the actual meaning of Marva's words to have that in there.
I agree.
But fuck the empire, right?
Fuck the empire, yeah. I love that sequence, you know, and it's it was interesting to see like how the empire like, you know, reacts to it. They see these peaceful protesters kind of coming down, but they want to like kind of give off this like, you know, show of force of like, we are the occupying regime.
We are the powerful ones.
Yes, we're the powerful ones.
And deliberate imagery reminiscent of police dealing with protesters. I think they have riot shields. They are like shooting into the crowds and stuff like that. And it really shows, because this is important too in our culture right now. But like every time there's a big protest, like for Black Lives Matter and stuff like that, everybody's like, well, I agree with the cause, but I don't agree with the looting and the rioting. And it's like every time that happened, those protests escalated to violence, it was escalated by the police. Yes. It was the protesters were peaceful. The police attacked them and they fought back. That is how it happened every time. This is a fact. This is not debatable. And this show is showing that, how the police state escalates peaceful demonstrations into violent situations. Like an example close to us, the Aurora Police Department violently assaulted people who were holding a violin vigil for Elijah McClain, a 23-year-old unarmed black man who was murdered by the police. He was assaulted by them on his way home. He was pinned down. He was just begging them to let him live. And then the paramedics who showed up injected him with ketamine and he died of a heart attack. He was murdered by the police. And then people were just holding a vigil for him, and the cops assaulted them with tear gas. Like that's what this show is commenting on here. But it also, and I just loved seeing Brazo just clock that fucking Nazi with a brick. How satisfying is that? God damn.
Very satisfying,
because that's what Nazis deserve.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it was very earned. But yeah, it was a very clear display of how, you know, fascists will just become kind of cowards when the facade is broken. When people,
they were all screaming and crying and crawling around.
And they were like, get in formation, like like as soon as they stood up, they were like, kill all the civilians. And it's like, Jesus Christ, you're not even thinking about your actions here. Like
and the reason for that is that all fascists are cowards. They know they are small, insignificant little losers. And they can be easily defeated by a united people. That's why they divide us all against each other. And it's why aesthetics are so important to fascists and Nazis. That's why Hitler had propagandists and filmmakers making these like movies. Oh God, what was the Triumph of the Will? That big like propaganda movie. That's why they make those, because they want you to think they're big and scary and smart and cool, so you don't fight against them. But they have to project that image, because as soon as it's shattered, they crumble. And really harping on the like anti-fascist points here, because like at this very moment, the most famous musical artist maybe in the world is parading himself around with little basement dwelling Nazi Nick Fuentes and pedophile defender Mayo Yiannopoulos, and running for president right now. So it's like, and I think Kanye, sorry, that's who I'm talking about. I think he's just very stupid. And not well, but
yes, I don't think he's very well, but I used to be a big fan of his.
I know. I was about to ask how you doing, man.
Oh, I do not give a shit about Kanye anymore. He's
he's been violently anti-black for several years now. Apparently he's been, and then he went on Alex Jones and
said he loved Hitler.
I am not gonna quote him, but I will say that he loves Hitler and said that he had a lot of good things to say about the Nazis. It's like, well, no, there are no good things to say about the Nazis. They like we had it right in World War II on that specific front. That specific front and that alone.
yes, we know what we were doing there, but yeah, there's nothing worse, or there are not many things worse than a black neo-Nazi. It's
just
fucked.
Any Nazi.
Yes, any Nazi in general is really bad. So, anyways, enough talking about that. Yeah,
but let's talk about themes of the show. We'll move on from we'll move as much on from real world stuff as is appropriate, but obviously extremely anti-imperialist and anti-fascist. It does on capitalism though. It does, as we mentioned, talk about how corporations are essential for fascism to succeed. And corporations, as history shows, will often align themselves with fascist regimes, as those regimes are, at first at least, more friendly to their business interests than left-wing regimes. That look it up as well. That exists. But it's about revolution. Shows about revolution and rebelling, and I think it's more honest than a lot of shows about revolution are, because fighting against a power like the Empire and fighting it nobly is a luxury that the people building those revolutions do not have, I think.
Well, yeah, like this whole idea of like, fighting the right way, like I think Kanan said, and like Rebels, it's like, yes, you can, that's a good idea in theory, but how are you going to fight the right way if you don't have the manpower for that? How are you going to fight the right way if you don't have the same technology as your opponent, or like you're so far behind that it's like, how do you level the playing field? And you can't if you're going to like try and do it honorably and nobly and justly and like not like stoop to their level. And it's like, yeah, it's nice to take the high road when you can, but the high road isn't always there.
It's like when Michelle Obama, remember, she's like, they go low, we go high. I'm like, you know what? How about you go low for once? Just one time. Just see how it goes. Just like take him out at the knees. Stop being holier than thou. Just get the job done. But Kanan and Ezra and friends, they only get to fight the right way because they're characters in a kid show, a cartoon.
Yes.
Like
they have to.
That is, and we're not saying that stories like that should not exist. Most stories should be like that, I think. But this is trying to tell a more realistic story about the cost to yourself of fighting a revolution and starting a revolution. Because if you're fighting the Empire, you have to play dirty because they're going to play dirty. And if you're not fighting dirty, they'll kill you. But characters like Luke and Leia and Han, they're only able to be those pure. It recontextualizes their heroism, right? They're only able to behave the way that they do because of all these people that came before. And even then, that is just about how it's presented to us, because when Luke Skywalker blew up the Death Star, he did kind of kill like 15 quintillion people, right? Like,
he's a radicalized terrorist who killed an astronomical amount of people. So his hands are not clean,
right? But within the context of that story, we're not supposed to think about that. That's why it bothered me when the like Lucasfilm authors were trying to like humanize the Death Star staff and stuff like that. It's like, but there were contractors on there. It's like, what? Yes,
think of the contractors.
I think it's a joke that goes back decades. It's like, it's fine as a joke, right? It's like they were just subcontractors working on the toilets, man. They didn't deserve to die. It's like, sure, that's funny. You're not meant to think about that in the context of the original Star Wars movie.
It's funny to think about. It's like, man, I got 26 more toilets to fix today. Oh God, there's an attack on the station. Oh, I hope I'm going to be okay. Don't worry.
No, you're only supposed to think about Grand Moff Tarkin when the Death Star is blowing up. That's why we only see Grand Moff Tarkin. It cuts to him and then he blows up. But that's the thing. It's like, it's a very honest look at the darkness that it has to be embraced for a revolution, which is a complicated subject for Star Wars because it's all about the light and the dark and all that stuff. But
Yes. Well, yeah, and I think Luthen as a character, he's another great addition to
mhm.
this show, as we said before, because he does kind of summarize that, and he is kind of the thesis of that idea,
Yes,
especially with that great monologue
the
that he
monologue
does.
is amazing.
Yes,
Yeah,
where
he
he's
like gives up his life. He says, I think I burned my soul for a sunrise I'll never see," and that I think is the theme of the show,
Mhm.
ultimately, because like Luthen vocalizes it, but Cassian and Melchi, his prison friend, they will die for the rebellion on Scarif to get the Death Star plans. Um, and this is why I know Kino died, because Kino inspires the prisoners to break out, knowing that he does not get to go. He will not make it. He'll die.
Yeah,
Marva inspires the people of Ferrix posthumously, even though she is not going to be able to see the fruits of that rebellion. Luthen is definitely going to die before the show's over, right?
I see that.
And Saw Gerrera dies on Jeddah. Like most of most of these characters burn themselves for a future that they will never get to see. And I watched Just Right's video on Andor, a really good video. And Sage, the creator, made a great point that that that's kind of the cost of being the early ones in a movement like this, and starting the fight against oppression, and why none of us want to do it, why none of us want to be the first people to take a stand, because those people, they don't make it, they don't get to see
Hmm.
the fruits of that labor, they die every time. um so
Hmm.
I think that was a really powerful point, is that a revolution and a true social change, it's built on the backs of the people who don't make it, and
Yeah,
that's it's a sad truth, I think. But
it is. Well, I think we talked Andor to the moon and back. We talked about it a lot.
yeah,
Do you have any final thoughts on Andor?
no, I think it's a masterpiece. It is. It might even pass The Last Jedi as the best Disney Star Wars for me. If not, it's close. It's up there.
I I
Um,
definitely think it's up there too because yeah, this is like again, you expect Star Wars to have the Force, lightsabers, and everything. That's the main
mhm.
draw of it. This show finally says, no, fuck that. We're going to explore the unexplored territory of Star Wars, and it really does embrace that, and I appreciate it for that, and
Mhm.
giving some screen time to the smaller guys, to the people who are actually making up the rebellion. It's not
Yeah.
just the big names, the generals, the Jedi. It's actually
Mhm.
the grunts, the people that are putting in the work and coming together to do
Yeah.
this stuff. So yeah, I would definitely recommend. And or if you have not watched it already, why did you listen to this podcast if you're all the way at the end?
Yeah.
But yes, this is such a
I
fantastic series.
I hope season 2 maintains that quality. I'm a little
Me too.
worried that it's supposed to span the entire next 5 years until Rogue One.
Mm.
Um, but if each like little mini arc of next season is just like they just jump a year between each one, I could see it working in that way. So, you
Yeah,
know,
I see that too.
but I think the original plan was to do 5 seasons. So
Whew,
I hope that if that was the original vision for the show, they get to do that, because
who knows?
they have my trust at this point, right? Like, um,
It's pretty solid, yeah. I don't
oh,
know
and
if I could do 5 seasons, but
maybe not, but I do have one note to close on, because there were a lot of people online, including me, saying like, this is what I want from Star Wars going forward, and I want to be very clear
mhm,
with what I mean by that. I don't mean I want Star Wars to just replicate what Andor did over and over again. That would be bad. That's studio brain, and that's how they always fuck things up. I want more Star Wars projects to um take the approach Andor took. It's like, do something new, find a new tone,
yeah,
find a new set of characters, a new angle. Find a new angle. Don't do what Andor did again, because you're not gonna be able to do it as good. They did it right the first time. Do something else. Um,
yeah,
but
I agree.
enough of the CGI like Luke Skywalker. No
Yeah, we don't
more
need that.
like get out of the prequel original trilogy time, do some other shit. But yeah, Andor, great show. Let's talk about other stuff really quick. It's getting late. Niles, what have you been watching, reading,
So
doing?
I've been watching a ton of new stuff lately. The only thing that's been dominating my life lately has been White Lotus
Mm-hmm.
season 2. I I'm just so in love with this show. It just kind of dominates your mind,
Yeah,
and it's because they're all kind of awful people, but they all kind of have these like redeeming qualities, and there's like characters that you're rooting for, and you're just so intrigued by the plot as
yeah,
well. It's just a phenomenal show. Season 2 is, I think, even better than the first season at this
great.
point. It's so great. So yeah, if you haven't checked out White Lotus, I would definitely recommend it. And then I've been I got bored the other weekend, and I was like, hey, there's a game I haven't played in a while called Civ 6. So I
Civilization,
started playing, yeah, Civilization, yeah,
nice.
again, Sid Meier. And it's just, yeah, it's been a blast just kind of going back to that again. It's
Yeah.
just kind of one of those fun, leisurely, casual games where it's like, yeah, I'm just having a fun time. I'm, just kind of managing my little civilization. It's
Mm-hmm.
good.
Cool.
What about you, Dylan? What have you been up to?
I finished Mistborn Shadows of Self. Pretty good book.
Nice.
I liked it. I started reading the next High Republic book, Fallen Star. I like it so far too. I am a little worried though, based on the uh some like not summary, but pitch in the inside cover. It's like this sounds very familiar to the last book. I hope it's not
Mm,
just the same structure again, because they do seem to. So far, the first two have been very similar in structure, and it's kind of weird. And also the fact that it's like a publishing universe where they're like, if you want the full story, you got to read the novels and the young adult books and the young reader collection and the comics. I'm like, I don't want to read the book for babies. Like, I
yeah.
don't want to do that to get a full story. So I am getting a little frustrated that it seems like I am not getting a full experience by reading this novel series. But
Mm,
I'm reading the comics too, but maybe that'll change.
nice.
Maybe I'll get a more full experience. I'm gonna keep reading the comics. And I rewatched
Hmm.
Rogue One, as I mentioned. Got the same problems with it that I've always had. The ending is great. It's a great sequence. Always was. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of it doesn't work. And then I have been playing the shit out of World of Warcraft Dragonflight. The new
Oh,
expansion
nice.
launched. I reached max level last night. I'm almost done with the main story campaign until the
Hell
next
yeah.
patch. And I've been streaming that on Twitch. I've streamed like 24 hours in the last week. So
Nice.
yeah,
Well, someone
but
goes check out his Twitch stream, man.
yeah, which leads us into our outros. Where can people? Oh wait, next episode first. We're gonna do a
Yeah.
Christmas episode. Comes out right before Christmas,
Christmas.
so we're gonna do
Christmas
that.
time.
Yeah. So not sure what we're gonna do yet. Probably like a classic, like Elf or something like that. Maybe do two
Yeah, we'll
movies.
figure it out.
We'll do something fun. But yeah, because I have to go home for the holidays, obviously. So we're gonna record that a little early, probably get that done, and then come back with something new in the new year. Maybe
Hmm.
Avatar, probably Avatar and
Yeah,
Glass
probably
Onion.
something like
Maybe
that.
the
Yeah.
first one's back. It'll be
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, yeah. One of those two would be
Um,
nice.
yeah, but we'll talk more about that in the next episode. But where can people find you online until then, Niles?
You can follow me. You can follow me on Instagram at Niles Got No Styles. That's going to be it for me. But Dylan, what about you? Where can people follow you? Where can they watch you on Twitch?
Yeah, find me on Twitter at D-Day Movies, on Instagram at DylanD1026, on YouTube at D-Day Movies, and on Twitch at D-Day_movies. I'm trying to hit affiliate. I'm not there yet, not even close. I have to have 50 followers and average 3 viewers, and I average like 0.7 viewers right now.
Got to start
um,
somewhere.
yeah, but I've been streaming a lot and having a good time. It would be more fun if I had a chat to chat with, though. So
Yeah, right.
please come join me, come hang out and follow me so I can make money off of this.
Down
um
for that.
yeah, but thank you all so much. This was a huge episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks for some Christmas fun
Yeah.
or
See
holiday
you
fun.
guys.
Holiday fun.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.